Natasha Hausdorf was at a debate in Ireland and she didn't hold back. She gave an entire hostile crowd an education on what's really happening between Israel and Gaza. Check it out.
It's very good to be with you in Dublin, having arrived today. But for the slew of misinformation which we have unfortunately just been privy to, beginning, unfortunately, with the reason for the delay in this debate, because it is the case that the only pre-invited speaker who had been confirmed in advance to have been disinvited at the last moment and refused a platform was my partner on the opposition. But I'm nonetheless here to speak on behalf of both of us against the appalling misinformation that we have just heard. I will be addressing the motion in this debate, and I will be talking about how the West has really failed the Palestinians. I'm going to first talk about real oppression against the Palestinian people. I'm going to be talking about brainwashing, and I'm going to be talking third about unrealistic expectations. But before that, it bears marking that Emily Hand's 9th birthday will be celebrated, or not, tomorrow, with her in captivity after her vicious abduction by Hamas terrorists. She is an Irish citizen. I'm sure you are all familiar with her name and her story. You are also probably also familiar with the bizarre sequence of events that saw her father celebrating at the news of her death. She was presumed dead in the 7th of October attacks, the atrocities that were committed by Hamas and other Palestinian terrorist organisations who crossed over into the border and infiltrated into Israeli civilian communities. When he was presented with that news, he celebrated because he knew what befalls those who are in captivity, what befalls young girls and women, especially in Hamas captivity. Her 9th birthday tomorrow. How could anyone do this to the Palestinian people, is what we heard already this evening. How could anyone do this to the Palestinian and the Israeli people? Those in captivity under Hamas and those Palestinians who have been in captivity since Hamas's violent takeover of the Gaza Strip in 2006. They won an election in 2005, but since 2006, when in that violent coup they threw their opposition Fatah members off of the roofs of buildings, they have controlled Gaza absolutely, viciously, torturing their own people, not to mention the atrocities that were committed on the 7th of October, and I must have missed reference to that in the speech that we heard previously. What we did hear was a plethora of misrepresentations about apartheid. Well, anyone who has visited Israel will know the utter nonsense that was just put forward to you. When I worked in the Supreme Court in Jerusalem, I worked under an Arab justice. There are currently Arab members of parliament sitting in Israel's Knesset. There are Arab doctors. There are Arab lawyers. There are Arab army officers who are, as we speak, defending the people of Israel against this heinous, barbaric terrorism, which is continuing as we speak, missiles falling onto Israeli civilian communities. They would, but for the Iron Dome defence system. They are in the Gaza Strip, rooting out Hamas terrorism and saving Palestinian civilians from that barbaric treatment, as we speak in Al-Shifa Hospital. We heard about the March of Return, the suggestion that this was an unarmed attempt to break out. The March of Return was a precursor to what we saw on the 7th of October. It involved Palestinian terrorists shooting at Israeli soldiers across the border. It involved them seeking to break through that border fence, which they succeeded on destroying on the 7th of October, and we all know the results of that. Absolutely absurd to be talking about it in the context of unarmed activity or protest. But what we did hear, in respect of these atrocities that were committed, this medieval barbarism, was a justification of it, if you can believe that, a rationalisation of it, an excuse, this idea that it was in resistance to something. I'll come on to what the Palestinian people are right to resist, and that is the brutal, authoritarian dictatorship that is Hamas. Perhaps most troubling from the speaker, we heard calls for the destruction of the State of Israel, the ethnic cleansing of Jews from land. And if that has a place in this illustrious debating chamber, it is a very sad day indeed. So let's talk about the real oppression, ladies and gentlemen. Those Palestinians that are suffering under Hamas, that are routinely tortured, Palestinians that I have spoken on behalf of at the UN Human Rights Council. And let's look at this motion. Why is it that the international community, the West in particular, has failed the people of Palestine? Because of their silence and their complicity. Where are the people speaking out for the way that the Palestinians have been treated in Jordan, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Egypt, and in the West Bank? Where are people standing up for real Palestinian rights? Because you can take it from me that the Israeli Arab community are the only free Arabs to live in the Middle East. That's why many of them are actually now defending their country, Israel.
Order. Order.
A hostile crowd indeed.
Order in the chamber.
They recognise the real oppression that so many of their cousins are subjugated to by the Arab world. And they recognise the opportunities that they have to live with equal rights as Israeli citizens in the only democracy in the Middle East. The second reason that we need to hold the West accountable for the position, for their failure of the Palestinian people, comes down to brainwashing. What we saw on the 7th of October was shocking, but not surprising. 3,000 people do not wake up one morning and decide spontaneously that it is a good day to slaughter Jews. You do not create 3,000 people who are able to cut the stomach of a pregnant woman, extract the fetus before killing them both, to burn children, to rape and slaughter.
Order.
You do not create people who are capable of that.
Order in the chamber.
Overnight. Anyone asking for evidence here?
Order in the chamber.
Anyone asking for evidence here needs only look at the videos that these terrorists have put out onto social media.
Order in the chamber.
Because these are the real war crimes, ladies and gentlemen. And the reason that they are beyond doubt, the reason that they have been so carefully documented, is because the terrorists have revelled in them, have shared the evidence of their barbarity and their atrocities with glee. That, ladies and gentlemen, can only be the result of 30 years of brainwashing in the UNRWA school system. Ever since Oslo and the Palestinian Authority control over the education system, we have seen textbooks and schools and television programmes for children exalting martyrdom, encouraging the exact acts that we saw on the 7th of October, the same ones that were attempted in that so-called March of Return, and the international community has to take responsibility for that, for the funding that it has provided, and for the UNRWA school system in which, according to their own statistics, 3 out of 4 of the terrorists who crossed that border on the 7th of October were educated in. And let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, this is not just Hamas. The people who crossed that border, including ordinary civilians, and it is thought that ordinary civilians are holding 60 hostages at present. The terrorists included Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Fatah, affiliates of the PLO, the so-called moderates in this equation. Under the pay-for-slay salary system, the Palestinian Authority, the so-called moderates, pays the salaries of terrorists no matter what banner they coalesce under. They pay them according to how many Jews they slaughter, the severity of their crimes and how long their sentences. That is brainwashing and incentivization to terror. When you promote hate, you reap war. And the final point to address here, the international community's responsibility for the international community's failure of the Palestinian people is unrealistic expectations. And on this, I take the words of the Palestinian Authority President, currently in his 18th year of a 4-year term, Mahmoud Abbas, in respect of Obama's policy on settlements, requiring the ethnic cleansing of Jews in Judea and Samaria. What was Mahmoud Abbas's response? He said, how can I be less Palestinian than the President of the United States? What did he mean by that? He meant that when America took positions advocating for the ethnic cleansing of Jews, advocating for things that no responsible Israeli government would countenance, he, as the President of the Palestinian Authority, was hamstrung. He could not go to a negotiating table asking for anything less. He could far less leave a negotiating table having achieved anything less than the President of the United States was asking for. So it is in that context that promoting those unrealistic expectations has been pushing peace further away, has been increasing divisions, and that lies at the responsibility of the international community also. On those counts, on the real oppression that the Palestinians are facing, on the brainwashing in UNRWA schools and the incentivization under the pay-for-slay policy, and on the constant perpetuation of unachievable positions in pursuit, supposedly, of peace, the West has indeed failed the Palestinian Arabs.
So some claps there. Great job by Natasha Hausdorf, speaking the truth in a hostile environment. It's not so easy. I think she continued here. Hold on.
75 years has been brought up. And
Would you like to answer?
I'm very happy to answer. So,
She's answering some of the hecklers.
apart from everything that I have unfortunately seen on social media and the testimonies of survivors, we also have 49 minutes of very strong material which has been shown to the international media. And reputable journalists have confirmed what they have seen. So if you are...
They're asking for proof of October 7th. So they literally filmed it.
not...
Evidence from the Palestinians.
Okay.
Not
So
45
let's...
minutes.
By the way, this is right after October 7th. You have all these students supporting the Palestinians right after October 7th. So this isn't like, a year after or 2 years after now, like when, maybe you can make the case that, Israel has gone too far. No. This is right after 1,200 Jews were murdered. And these people are like, well, I don't care about that because it's just the Jews.
It's very interesting that people talk about 75 years because there is a misconception that is propagated, it seems to have fallen away in the last month or so, that actually the only objection that the Palestinian leadership has is to Israel after 1967, when Israel recovered territory that had been occupied by Jordan and the West Bank in particular. Right. Yeah. 75 years has been brought up, and that requires an answer. What it actually means, 75 years, is an objection to the state of Israel's very existence in any borders. Yes. That is something, yes, well, some of the members of the audience are agreeing with me. They'll never...
In Israel.
That is something that is incredibly important to understand because it has been consistently the position of the Palestinian Authority and the PLO before it, which of course was established in 1964. Before there was any concept of Israel recovering that territory that had been seized from it as a fledgling state after it declared independence, in its war of independence by Jordan. So it's very, very telling, and I encourage anyone here who actually has an open mind to look into these issues and believe the words of the people who are advocating for Israel's destructions. That includes the Hamas leadership, who have said that they intend to commit 7th of October, over and over and over again. That is not an act of any resistance. They have an autonomy and complete self-rule in the Gaza Strip. This evening, there was supposed to be a representative of the Palestinian Authority. Who is that person a representative of if there is an occupation? She would be an Israeli diplomat here this evening if there was an occupation. You are being fed misinformation, and I urge you to listen to the words of the Palestinian leadership, that of the PA and in the Gaza Strip, and in particular of their paymasters in Iran.
Brilliant response there, and she laid it all out. It's crazy we have to answer these questions. Show me your proof, bro. They live streamed it. We're not even having this conversation at this point. For more, subscribe to the channel. If you want to help us make more of these videos and support the channel, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. You can also go to our channel memberships page and join there. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.